Hello everyone, welcome back to Hit the Apex. I'm Charlie and today we have another video. This time we are reviewing round 19 of the 2023 F1 season, where we were at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin in Texas for the 2023 United States Grand Prix. Before we get going, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Daily, the football channel. Hit the Apex F1 channel and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. We will start in practice one, of course, where Verstappen led Leclerc and Hamilton as the sprint weekend kicked off in Austin. Max Verstappen set the pace at the one and only practice session for this weekend's United States Grand Prix as the Red Bull driver led rivals Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton after a busy hour of running in Austin. With just 60 minutes on the clock to finalise their setups for the weekend, the drivers made their way out onto the track, greeted by warm conditions, looking to get up to speed as quick as possible ahead of qualifying later today. After 20 minutes of running, it was Hamilton who set the early pace as his time of 1 minute 37.394 seconds was enough to lead Verstappen by 0.104 seconds on the hard tyre, with the Mercedes driver putting the updated floor on the W14 through its paces. Also trailing a new floor in FP1 was Aston Martin, but it wasn't good news for the Silverstone-based squad, with Lance Stroll forced to pit with brake issues, while Fernando Alonso was also brought in for precautionary checks. Aston Martin later confirmed that Stroll would not be taking part in the rest of the session, as Lando Norris went fastest. Moments later, his teammate Oscar Piastri had a squirrely moment and ran through the grass on the exit of turn 9. With 15 minutes left, we saw the first of the soft tyre runners make their way out of the pit lane as Logan Sargent and Alex Albon, who was supporting one-off American-inspired liveries on their cars, prepared for some qualifying simulation runs. Another team rocking a colourful livery on their car this weekend was Red Bull, as Verstappen showed the RB19's pace to go fastest with a time of 1 minute 35.912 seconds, with Leclerc in second 0.156 seconds off the Dutch driver's time. Hamilton went fastest through the first two sectors but went wide at the penultimate corner to end up third ahead of Sergio Perez. Haas are another team with a one-off livery this weekend, and they also brought major upgrades to Austin, and Kevin Magnussen impressed many as he went fifth. George Russell was sixth in the other Mercedes as Albon wound up seventh ahead of the other Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. The second Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, with the Alpine of Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10. Home favourite Sargent ended up 11th for Williams ahead of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, the AlphaTauris of Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo, who was less than a 10th off his teammate as he marked his return after a 5-race absence due to a broken hand. Norris and Piastri didn't strap on a set of softs with all their times, and the former was 15th for McLaren, with the latter down in 19th. Alfa Romeo teammates Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas did put on the softs and was 16th and 17th. Alonso was able to continue on, but also didn't put on the soft tyre and finished 18th, with Stroll bringing up the rear of the field. The lone practice session of the weekend was now complete, and the drivers and their teams would now ready themselves for the United States Grand Prix qualifying at 4 p.m. local time. And in qualifying, Leclerc outdueled Norris and Hamilton to take pole in Austin after Verstappen had his time deleted. Charles Leclerc came out on top after an enthralling qualifying hour in Austin as the Ferrari driver put in a sublime late effort to take pole ahead of rivals Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton for the United States Grand Prix. Leclerc was on provisional pole after the first runs in Q3 and improved on his final attempt by 0.2 with his lap of 1 minute 34.723 seconds, giving him his third pole of the season. Norris wound up second, over a 10th off Leclerc, while Hamilton looked on course to take pole, but ended up third in his upgraded Mercedes. Carlos Sainz was fourth for Ferrari, with George Russell rounding out the top 5. Max Verstappen looked to have placed his Red Bull on pole, but had his time deleted for exceeding track limits at the penultimate corner and will start the race from 6th, ahead of the Alpine of Pierre Gasly in 7th. Esteban Ocon was 8th for Alpine, ahead of the second Red Bull of Sergio Perez, with the McLaren of Oscar Piastri down in 10th. AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda narrowly missed out on a place in Q3, but qualified in 11th for the second race in a row, and he will start ahead of the Alfa Romeos of Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas. Kevin Magnussen was the lead Haas down in 14th, while the other AlphaTauri of Daniel Ricciardo had his fastest time deleted in Q2, meaning he's set to start Sunday's event from 15th. There were plenty of shocks in the first part of qualifying, with the upgraded Haas of Nico Hulkenberg having briefly led the timesheets in Q1 down in 16th. He will line up ahead of Fernando Alonso, who failed to make it into Q3 for the first time all year, and he's 17th for Aston Martin. Alex Albon was down in 18th for Williams, ahead of the other Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, who after missing most of FP1 with a brake issue was 19th, while home favourite Logan Sargent brought up the rear of the field. So as it happened then in Q1, Hamilton set the pace as Aston Martin suffered a shock double exit. Austin plays host to the 5th sprint of the sprint weekend of the season, and under the 2023 format, the drivers had just one practice session to finalise their setups and get to grips with the track. This meant there were plenty of unknowns regarding each team's pace heading into qualifying. As the light turned green, the drivers came out on track greeted by hot temperatures, but it was Gasly bringing the early heat as the Alpine driver went fastest with a time of 1 minute 36.158 seconds to lead Hulkenberg in the upgraded Haas by 0.077 seconds. Verstappen was third ahead of Ocon, Leclerc, Stroll, Russell, Norris and Piastri as Perez rounded out the top 10, but the track was ramping up as Leclerc later went fastest, only for Sainz to eclipse his time by nearly 3/10 moments later. After a slight lull in proceedings, the drivers made their way back out onto the circuit ahead of their final flying laps. As he set off on his lap, Verstappen, who was now in 5th, was told by his engineer that his time was on the bubble of seeing him knocked out. Down in the bottom 5, looking to make their way into Q2, were Albon, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Zhou and Sargent, who was the only driver not to have set a time after having his time deleted for exceeding track limits. The checkered flag was waved. There was huge shocks as Hulkenberg, having been fighting at the sharp end at the start of the session, was down in 16th. The biggest surprise was Alonso in 17th, with only Albon, his Aston Martin teammate Stroll and Sargent slower than him. Hamilton continued to impress with the new floor of his W14 as he led the way in Q1 with a lap of 1 minute 35.091 seconds. It was closely followed by Norris, Verstappen, Sainz, Tsunoda, Perez, Magnussen, Zhou, Leclerc and Piastri. Bottas left it late to make it into Q2 as he wound up 11th ahead of Ocon, Gasly, Russell and Ricciardo, who narrowly made it out of Q1 as he continued his return from a broken hand. So knocked out in Q1 was Hulkenberg, Alonso, Albon, Stroll and Sargent. In Q2, Leclerc led as Ricciardo was knocked out. After a short break, the drivers were back out on track for the second part of qualifying, but there were still some repercussions from Q1 as the stewards announced that they will investigate Tsunoda, Ricciardo and Stroll after the session for failing to follow the race director's instructions on the maximum delta time. But out on track, it was Verstappen who set the benchmark time as the Dutch drivers lap of 1 minute 35.491 seconds was good enough to lead Piastri by just 0.085 seconds. Behind them were the Alpines of Ocon and Gasly, as well as Perez, Russell, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Leclerc and Bottas. In the bottom 5 was Ricciardo, Magnussen, Zhou, Sainz, who was heard over the radio complaining of being blocked by Tsunoda, and Norris, whose time was deleted for exceeding track limits after sliding off at the penultimate corner. With 4 minutes left, the drivers returned to the track on brand new softs. As they took the checkered flag, it was Leclerc who topped the leaderboard as his lap of 1 minute 35.004 seconds saw him beat Verstappen by just a mere 0.004 seconds. Hamilton survived a squirrely moment at the final corner as he wound up third, ahead of Sainz, Ocon, Norris, Gasly, Piastri, and Russell. Russell left it late to go through to Q3 in ninth, with Perez sneaking into the final portion of qualifying in 10th. Tsunoda narrowly missed out on a place in Q3, but out-qualified his teammate Ricciardo in 15th after his fastest time was deleted for exceeding track limits. Zhou won the battle at Alfa Romeo as he qualified 12th, ahead of Bottas, with Magnussen in 14th. So knocked out in Q2 was Tsunoda, Zhou, Bottas, Magnussen, and Ricciardo. And in Q3, Leclerc sealed pole as Verstappen had his time deleted. With 10 drivers done for the day, it was left to the remaining 10 to battle it out for pole. After the first spate of times, it was Leclerc on provisional pole, with his lap of 1 minute 34.829 seconds, good enough to lead Hamilton by 0.056 seconds. A frustrated Verstappen returned to the garage after believing he was hampered by his teammate Perez at the last corner, causing him to only be third following those initial runs. He was ahead of Sainz, Gasly, Perez, Norris, Piastri, and Ocon, with Russell down in 10th, having had his time deleted for exceeding track limits. The drivers then returned to the track for their final laps of the day, and it was Leclerc who crossed the line first. He improved on his first attempt with his time of 1 minute 34.723 seconds, now the one to beat for the rest of his rivals. Verstappen looked to have beaten it, but ran wide at the penultimate corner, meaning his lap was deleted for exceeding track limits as he went from first to sixth on the leaderboard. Norris improved on his final attempt to go second, while Hamilton took third. Sainz was over 2 tenths off his teammate and will start fourth ahead of Russell, while the Alpine Gasly was in seventh behind Verstappen. He was followed by his teammate Ocon in eighth, with Perez down in ninth ahead of Piastri in 10th. Leclerc said after qualifying, "I think as a team we did a great job. We know that in this sprint weekend it's more important than ever to have a clean FP1, and we did. We had a good FP1. We started with a strong base thanks to the work the guys have done to prepare this weekend, with the car straight away feeling good. Then I was feeling good, and the lap, I was happy throughout qualifying. The last lap in Q3, there was a bit of mistakes here and there, but I think it wasn't easy for everybody, so really happy to be starting on pole for Sunday." Before the 2023 United States Grand Prix gets going on Sunday, the drivers will next hit the track for Saturday's sprint shootout at 12:30 local time ahead of the 100-kilometer dash. We will move to the sprint shootout then, where Verstappen charged to sprint pole in Austin as he narrowly beat Leclerc and Hamilton. Max Verstappen returned to form on Saturday as he came out on top of an entertaining sprint shootout at the United States Grand Prix, the Dutch driver narrowly getting the best of rivals Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. On his one and only lap in SQ3, Verstappen set a time of 1 minute 34.538 seconds to get pole for the sprint, making up for his deleted pole position lap time in Friday's qualifying and besting Leclerc's effort by just 0.055 seconds. Hamilton was one of the last drivers to cross the line, and he wound up third, 0.069 seconds off Verstappen's time. The Mercedes man will line up alongside compatriot Lando Norris in fourth. He was followed by McLaren teammate Oscar Piastri. Carlos Sainz was sixth for Ferrari, followed by the Red Bull of Sergio Perez and the Mercedes of George Russell, the latter two drivers setting their times on used softs. Alex Albon was ninth for Williams as the Alpine of Pierre Gasly rounded out the top 10. Daniel Ricciardo will give AlphaTauri their second P11 start of the weekend as he narrowly missed out on a place in SQ3. He will line up alongside Fernando Alonso in 12th in what was an improved performance from the Aston Martin driver after his Q1 exit on Friday. Esteban Ocon will start the sprint in 13th for Alpine, while Lance Stroll's huge lock-up into turn 12 saw him unable to complete his lap, leaving him 14th in the other Aston Martin. He will start ahead of Zhou Guanyu in 15th, as the Alfa Romeo racer out-qualified Valtteri Bottas for the second time this weekend. Both Haas drivers failed to make it out of SQ1, with Nico Hulkenberg set to start the sprint from 16th, next to Kevin Magnussen in 17th. They will line up ahead of Bottas, the AlphaTauris of Yuki Tsunoda, and the Williams of Logan Sargent in 20th. So as it happened then, in SQ1, Verstappen set the pace in a frenetic first 12 minutes. After an action-packed first day of running in Austin that saw Leclerc take pole after a thrilling multi-team qualifying battle, the drivers returned on Saturday to do it all again, but this time for the sprint shootout. As the lights turned green, the drivers filed out onto the track one by one, all strapping on a set of mandatory medium tyres. And after the first set of times, it was Verstappen who set the pace. His lap of 1 minute 35.997 seconds, seeing him lead Leclerc by over 3/10. But with less than 3 minutes to go in the session, there would have been plenty of sweaty palms on the pit wall, especially at McLaren, although Piastri was able to go from 20th to 11th, while Norris went from 10th to 8th. When the drivers set off on their final laps, Verstappen, who was feeling confident enough to stay in the pit lane, led Leclerc, Sainz, Russell, Perez, Ocon, Hamilton, Norris, Gasly and Zhou completed the top 10. Alonso, who was knocked out of Q1 on Friday, was the driver at risk in 15th, while Bottas, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Stroll and Sargent were currently looking set to fall at the first hurdle of the shootout. The checkered flag dropped, the times began to come thick and fast as the track looked to be ramping up, but Verstappen's time still proved to be fastest, although Leclerc improved to go 0.002 seconds off his rival's time. Albon put in a strong lap to go third ahead of Sainz, Russell, Perez, Alonso, Ocon, Hamilton and Norris. Zhou was 11th for Alfa Romeo ahead of Stroll and Gasly, as Piastri narrowly made it out of SQ1 along with Ricciardo, who was down in 15th. There was plenty of frustration for Tsunoda as he found himself 19th, although the stewards didn't feel his incident with Hamilton, where the two almost made contact, warranted an investigation. He was knocked out alongside Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Bottas and Sargent. So knocked out in SQ1 was Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Bottas, Tsunoda and Sargent. Moving on to SQ2 then, Verstappen survived a spin to lead the way as Ricciardo missed out. While the drivers made their way back out on track for the second portion of the shootout, the stewards were busy investigating a few incidents from SQ1. Russell was set to be investigated for impeding Leclerc, and the Briton was also among a cluster of drivers set to be looked at after the session for failing to follow the race director's instructions on maximum delta time. But that was all put to the side for the time being, as Verstappen once again continued to be the standard for the rest of the field. His lap of 1 minute 35.181 seconds was the lead time, ahead of Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Perez, Piastri, Stroll and Zhou. But we were yet to see laps from both Mercedes and Alpine, as well as Albon, Alonso and Ricciardo, as they emerged from the garages for the first time in SQ2 with only 4 minutes left. Verstappen was still out on track, but he was forced to come back into the pit lane after he spun through the grass at turn 9. But as he came back into the garage, the last few drivers set off on their first and only laps of SQ3. Verstappen's time still stood as the top 6 remained unchanged, with Gasly moving up to 7th ahead of Russell, Hamilton and Albon. Ricciardo narrowly missed out on SQ3 in 11th, with Alonso, Ocon, Stroll and Zhou also getting knocked out. So knocked out in SQ2 was Ricciardo, Alonso, Ocon, Stroll and Zhou. And in SQ3, Verstappen beat Leclerc and Hamilton by the barest of margins. As the lights went green for the final 8 minutes of the shootout, The stewards announced that a number of drivers, including Russell, again would be investigated after the session for failing to follow the race director's instructions. With many of the drivers only having one set of the soft tyre available, the track was quiet for the first half of SQ3, but one by one they quickly emerged from the pit lane with 4 minutes remaining. Verstappen was the first driver to cross the line and he completed a lap on 1 minute 34.538 seconds, but with some of his rivals setting purple sectors behind him, it looks like that time would not be enough for pole. But that didn't prove the case, with Leclerc going the closest in second ahead of Hamilton and Norris, as the top four were covered by just 0.101 seconds. Piastri had a much improved Saturday and was fifth for McLaren ahead of Sainz. Perez will start seventh ahead of Russell in eighth, with both drivers setting their times in SQ3 on used softs, with Albon in an impressive ninth for Williams ahead of the Alpine of Gasly. Verstappen said after the sprint shootout, the last lap wasn't great, but we're still on pole, so the car's working well. Today should be great. So many teams quite close. Normally in the race we're quite okay, but this track is quite demanding. Tyre management is quite key round here. It's going to be tough. The drivers will now have a break before lining up for the 100-kilometre sprint at 5 p.m. local time later today. And we will move to the sprint then, where Verstappen dominated to beat Hamilton and Leclerc to victory in the Austin sprint. Max Verstappen converted pole position into a dominant sprint victory in Austin as the Dutch driver took the checkered flag comfortably ahead of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Verstappen and Leclerc came close at the start as the former defended stoutly into turn one, but once he did, he pulled away from his rivals to take his third sprint victory of the season. Hamilton overtook Leclerc on the exit of turn one at the start, and while he stayed within DRS range of Verstappen early on, he had to settle for second, with Leclerc holding off Lando Norris at the end to take the final spot in the top three. The drivers met a much cooler track for the sprint than the one they had for the shootout. As the start approached, the tyre blankets were raised, showing every driver had opted for a set of the medium tyres, except for Carlos Sainz, who made the bold call to go with the softs. When the lights went out, Verstappen made a strong getaway from pole as he covered off the attack from Leclerc in second, but as Leclerc looked to tuck him behind Verstappen, Hamilton came past the Ferrari driver on the exit of turn one. Sainz, who was on the softs, was on the charge and had got past Norris for fourth after making slight contact with Piastri at the start. Russell made up for his three-place grid drop to go from 11th to 8th, right behind Perez in 7th. As we headed on to lap 2, Perez was looking incredibly racy in his RB19 and looked to make a move on the outside of Piastri at turn 12. The rookie driver held off the challenge with Russell behind, looking to take every advantage of the ongoing squabble. Perez would only have to wait a lap later to make his way past Piastri at the exit of turn 12, with Russell following the Red Bull driver through to go up to 7th at turn 15. However, the Briton was soon being investigated for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, with the watching Gasly behind in 9th calling for him to give the place back. As lap 5 got going, Hamilton was well within DRS range of Verstappen, showcasing the strong pace of the W14, as the sprint leader came on the radio to question the drivability of his RB19. Further back, Sainz's softs was showing signs of degradation as Norris began to close the gap to his former teammate. As the Briton closed in on the Ferrari driver for fourth, the stewards handed Russell a 5-second penalty for the earlier incident with Piastri. But that would have done little to make Piastri's day better, as he continued to struggle for pace as both Gasly and Albon overtook the Australian, leaving him in 10th out of the points and now under pressure from Ocon and Ricciardo. Back at the front of the field, Verstappen had now pulled out a 2-second gap on Hamilton, who was heard questioning whether the former had been exceeding track limits. However, there was nothing to suggest such a thing from the stewards. It was more bad news for Piastri as he was handed a black and white flag for exceeding track limits one too many times. His eventful afternoon continued as the stewards notified that they would be investigating an incident between him and Albon for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. On lap 10, Norris eventually made his way past Sainz at turn 12, giving the Briton free air to chase the other Ferrari of Leclerc. Turn 12 was proving to be an unpopular spot for Sainz, as a lap later Perez overtook the Spaniard for sixth. Further back, there was plenty of squabbling going on as Ricciardo closed in on Stroll for 12th, while his AlphaTauri teammate Tsunoda battled past the Haas of Hulkenberg for 16th. Just as the stewards announced that there would be no need to look any further into Albon for leaving the track and gaining an advantage on his overtake on Piastri, they revealed that they would be investigating Zhou for forcing Magnussen off the track. Now on lap 15, Russell was putting Sainz under pressure, but the Spaniard was making it very difficult for the Mercedes. Further back, Ricciardo and Alonso had overtaken Stroll, who came on the radio to complain on it of his aging tyres. At the front, Verstappen was continuing to extend his advantage over Hamilton, with a gap between the 2021 title rivals now well over 6 seconds. Elsewhere, Stroll came on the radio again to complain of his brakes, with Aston Martin opting to retire his AMR 23. As we got onto the penultimate lap of the race, Albon, who was in ninth, began to set a couple of personal best sectors as he looked to get him within 5 seconds of Russell in seventh, in the hope of gaining a place once the Mercedes driver's 5 second penalty kicked in. Onto the final lap, the stewards revealed that there will be no need to further investigate Zhou for forcing Magnussen off the track. However, the Chinese racer was handed a 5 second penalty for later leaving the track and gaining an advantage on Magnussen. As the checkered flag arrived, Verstappen crossed the line to take his third sprint win of the season, with Hamilton in second, his best finish in the sprint since Silverstone in 2021, nearly 10 seconds behind the Red Bull. Leclerc held off the late challenger Norris to take third, with the McLaren driver made to settle for fourth ahead of Perez. Sainz kept Russell at bay for sixth, while Gasly crossed the line in eighth, but moved up to seventh once the Britain's penalty kicked in. Albon did a personal best on his last lap and ended up just 3 tenths off Russell, but was forced to settle for ninth, while Piastri crossed the line in 10th ahead of Ocon and his compatriot Ricciardo. Alonso finished in 13th ahead of the other AlphaTauri of Tsunoda, the Haas of Hulkenberg, Valtteri Bottas and Zhou, whose penalty didn't cost him much as he finished 17th. Magnussen wound up 18th with Logan Sargent, the last of the remaining drivers out on track due to Stroll's retirement. And Verstappen said after the sprint, the pace of the car was very good today and I need it tomorrow. Starting P6 is a bit different to today. Hope we can have some fun tomorrow. And of course, I want to win. Next up for the drivers then was the United States Grand Prix on Sunday. And we will move to the race where Verstappen held off a charging Hamilton to claim his 50th F1 victory at the United States Grand Prix. Max Verstappen recovered from sixth on the grid to take a nerve-wracking win at the United States Grand Prix. The Red Bull man held off a fast approaching Lewis Hamilton and the McLaren of Lando Norris to claim his 50th Formula One race win. After a quiet start, Verstappen gradually picked off his rivals one by one in what was a tense Austin affair. He took the lead from Norris, who had earlier taken first place on the opening lap ahead of pole sitter Charles Leclerc. Hamilton, who was on new mediums, chased down Norris for second with a few laps to go and looked to close in on Verstappen for the win in a reverse scenario of what happened in last year's race where Verstappen chased down Hamilton for the win, but to no avail as he settled for second. Norris held off the late advances of Carlos Sainz to take his fourth podium in a row ahead of the other Red Buller Sergio Perez, who overtook a very frustrated Leclerc late in the event to finish fifth. Leclerc ended up sixth for Ferrari, with George Russell seventh as the Alpine Pierre Gasly came home in an impressive eighth. Lance Stroll recovered from a pit lane start to finish ninth for Aston Martin as Yuki Tsunoda rounded out the top 10, while also claiming a valuable point for AlphaTauri in the form of a fastest lap. Alex Albon's 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits didn't cost him a position as he finished 11th, although he'll be investigated after the race for multiple breaches of the same offence. The Thai racer was followed by his Williams teammate Logan Sargent in 12th. They have now both finished in the points due to disqualifications for Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Nico Hulkenberg was the lead Haas on the day as he finished 13th ahead of the Alfa Romeos of Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, with his teammate Kevin Magnussen down in 16th. The returning Daniel Ricciardo was the last of the remaining runners for AlphaTauri. There were 3 drivers who failed to see the checkered flag, as Fernando Alonso, Oscar Piastri and Esteban Ocon all retired from the race due to issues with their respective cars. So as it happened then, after a frenetic sprint weekend, it all came down to this as the drivers lined up preparing to do battle in Austin. Verstappen claimed the victory in Saturday's 100-kilometre dash, but starting 6th, could he translate his strong pace to race day to secure the win? Before the race got started, there would be a few changes to the starting grid, with both Aston Martin and Haas drivers set to start from the pit lane after changes were made to their cars overnight. As the tyre blankets were raised, it showed all drivers starting on a set of the medium tyres, with the only exception being Stroll and Hulkenberg, who were looking to go long in the first stint on a set of hards. As the lights went out, it was a brilliant start for Norris, who got ahead of Leclerc on the run down to turn 1, while Sainz made his way past Hamilton for 3rd. Further back, Piastri had gone from 10th to 6th despite being tagged by Ocon. On the charge, Piastri was now looking to get ahead of Verstappen into turn 12, although the Dutch driver was able to keep the rookie behind, as Sainz also had a look down the inside of Leclerc further ahead at the same corner. As we approached the end of lap 2, Norris had moved over 2 seconds ahead of Leclerc out at the front, while Ocon was now complaining about having side pod damage as he came under threat from Russell. Russell, having dropped from 5th to 8th, was noted for leaving the track and gaining an advantage into turn 1. He made his way past Ocon at turn 11, with Perez following him through past the Alpine racer, one corner later. Further ahead, Hamilton was now right on the back of Sainz's gearbox, and despite the Spaniard's best efforts to keep him behind, the Mercedes driver overtook his rival at the very popular turn 12. Gasly, who was now in 10th, came on the radio to call for Ocon not to hold him up, although his damage-suffering teammate was powerless to resist his attack. Ocon was now visibly struggling for pace as he dropped to the back of the field by the end of lap 5. At the same time, Verstappen was now beginning to make his move as he overtook Sainz into turn 12. Elsewhere, the stewards believed there was no need to further investigate Russell for leaving the track and gaining an advantage on lap 1. Hamilton was now showing the pace of his updated W14 as he got within Leclerc's DRS within the space of a couple of laps. The Mercedes driver breezed past the Monegasque at turn 12, with his next target Norris 3 seconds up the road. It was more bad news for Ocon as he was unable to continue with the side pod damage he sustained from his collision with Piastri at the start, with Alpine opting to retire his car for the 3rd time in 5 races. Piastri didn't last much longer as McLaren retired his car due to radiator damage sustained from his contact with Ocon. As we approached the end of lap 11, Verstappen was now closing in on Leclerc as he made his DRS advantage count as he eased his way past the Ferrari once again into turn 12. Hamilton then set the fastest lap of the race on lap 13, and he'd now closed the gap to Norris to 2.5 seconds. His teammate Russell, however, was the brunt of Perez's frustrations as he believed the Briton had exceeded track limits on multiple occasions. By lap 14 of 56, there was signs of life at Aston Martin as Alonso and Stroll were now running in 11th and 12th, behind the returning Ricciardo in 10th. Back at the front, Hamilton was now just behind Norris. Verstappen was the first of the front runners to make the call to swap tyres on lap 17, the three-time champion bolting on a second set of new medium tyres. A lap later, Norris, Sainz and Perez all followed suit, and while the latter two opted for the mediums, the former was on the hards. On lap 20, replay showed Hamilton was now struggling with his tyres as he locked up at turn 11. His mood would not have been helped by being told that Verstappen was now within his pit window. Mercedes then opted to bolt the hard tyres onto Hamilton's car, with the Dutch racer having now completed the undercut. Leclerc was the last of the front runners to change his tyres. He came back out on the hards, but having gone long on the first stint, he'd lost out to Sainz and Perez. Track limits continued to be an issue during the race, with multiple drivers having times deleted. The latest was Magnussen, who was now being shown a black and white flag by the stewards as Alonso overtook Zhou to make his way up into the top 10. Norris was now being told that his battle was with Verstappen, and with replay showing him locking up at turn 11, the Red Bull man was now stalking the McLaren as he was just a second and a half behind as they crossed the line to start lap 26. On lap 29 of 56, Verstappen finally made his pace advantage count, capitalising on Norris locking up to dive down the inside at turn 12. Norris produced a valiant defence to try to retake the position, but it proved to be futile. Hamilton had earlier been told by his engineer that they were looking to offset Verstappen by going on the hard tyre, and as we approached lap 33, this was proving to be the case, as both he and Norris were now closing in on the Red Bull driver. It was also worth noting the pace of Perez in fifth, who was having a decent outing in Colter, having made his way up from ninth, and he was showing a good turn of pace as he closed in on Sainz for P4. By lap 35 of 56, Hamilton was now well within 3 seconds of Norris, with McLaren now opting to pit the Briton. This gave Red Bull food for thought as they planned the next move, but they made the call to bring Verstappen in on the following lap. But the question now was, what would Mercedes do with Hamilton? Multiple drivers were now bolting the hard tyres onto their cars, including Perez and Sainz, but as the race reached a tipping point at the end of lap 38, Mercedes brought Hamilton into the pit lane for some new medium tyres. With 17 laps remaining, we were now set for an entertaining end of the race as Verstappen breezed past Leclerc, swiftly followed by Norris. Important news for the pair as Hamilton began setting some personal best sectors. There was plenty going on at Williams on lap 42, as well. Sargent was issued with a black and white flag for exceeding track limits. Albon, who was now on a new set of mediums, made his way past Ricciardo, although the AlphaTauri driver was on 19-lap-old hards. Like Albon, another medium-shod driver, Hamilton, was also on the move as he overtook Leclerc for third. With 12 laps left, did he have enough in the tank to overhaul Norris and Verstappen to get his first win in 2 years? Elsewhere, it was proven to be an outstanding recovery drive from Alonso, who is now ninth after overtaking Tsunoda. Next in his sights for eighth was the man who replaced him at Alpine, Gasly. As the drivers set off on their 46th lap, Hamilton was now 2.5 seconds behind Norris in second. He would have had to up his pace to catch Verstappen for the win, however, as the Red Bull pilot was matching his pace. Stroll followed his teammate Alonso past Tsunoda, although he was less than impressed with the Japanese racer for what he felt was him moving too late under braking. But a good day quickly turned sour as Alonso complained of a rear suspension failure as he was forced to retire the car a few laps later. Hamilton was now within DRS range of Norris, and after a few attempts, he made it past at turn 1, despite the McLaren driver's stern defence. But with 8 laps remaining and a 5-second gap to Verstappen to overhaul, could he chase the Red Bull driver down? Meanwhile, the two Ferraris were now battling, and as Sainz made his way past on these pressure hard tyres, Perez was also now closing in. Leclerc was less than pleased with Ferrari's call to let Sainz through, with the Spaniard now closing on Norris for the final spot on the podium. A little later, Albon was handed a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits one too many times, but with 2 laps to go, attentions turned to the front as Hamilton was well within 2 seconds of Verstappen, who was still complaining of brake issues. But on the final lap, the gap proved too big for Hamilton to close as Verstappen crossed the line to take his 3rd consecutive win at Coulter and his 50th win in Formula One, as the Briton took his 2nd P2 finish of the weekend following the sprint. Norris took 3rd across the line with Sainz unable to close the gap to his former teammate, instead finishing in a well-earned 4th. Perez did in the end overtake Leclerc for 5th, with the Ferrari calling for a debrief post-race in 6th. Russell was 7th, followed by Gasly, Stroll and Tsunoda, who finished in 10th and also boxed late on for the soft tyre to take an extra point for the fastest lap. Albon and Sargent finished 11th and 12th for Williams, with Hulkenberg in 13th for Haas. Bottas was the lead driver for Alfa Romeo in 14th, with Zhou following his teammate across the line in 15th, as Magnussen took 16th ahead of the last of the remaining runners, Ricciardo. Verstappen said after the race, "I think the whole race I was struggling a lot with the brakes. Around here there are quite a few braking points, so I couldn't really have the same feeling as yesterday, so that made my race a bit tougher out there today. You could see it was very close in the end, and there were also the back markers. When the tyres are already going, it makes it a bit more difficult, sorry. The drivers don't have to wait too long to get back in the car as we head to Mexico next weekend for the 2nd race of the triple header." So that is it for this video then. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Daily, the football channel. Hit the Apex F1 channel and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care and goodbye for now.